We're reaching the dog days of summer here, and my staff's vacation schedules will tell you that. Matt is away this weekend celebrating a bachelor weekend, bachelorette party weekend. Debbie's still on vacation. Michael flies back tomorrow. Xavier and Tito are here. Cambridge and I are here, and that's all you got. And as we reach these dog days of summer, we also reach these dog days moments in the book of Genesis. We've now got pages and chapters and stories behind us, and still pages and pages and chapters and stories ahead of us. And today we arrive with another pair of brothers. Last week we talked about Abraham, and we moved through the Genesis of Abraham and his children. Remember Ishmael and Isaac, and the problems of blessings that don't go to oldest children, but that go to younger sons, namely Isaac, not Ishmael. Today, we're going to talk about Jacob and Esau. It's another hearty chunk of chapters to look at. And instead of me telling you about the chapters, we're going to look at 3 sections together. So we're going to get our Bibles out in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to read to you this from one of the theological texts that I go to when studying. And this is the introduction to what is known as the Jacob narrative, chapters 25 through 36 that we're looking at today. The narrative about Jacob portrays Israel in its earliest and most scandalous appearance in Genesis. The narrative is not edifying in any conventional religious or moral sense. Indeed, if one comes to the narrative with any such agenda, the narrative is offensive. Theologians write this, so if you take offense with some things in the Bible, know that you're not alone. Professionals do too. But for this very reason, the Jacob narrative is most lifelike. It presents Jacob in his crude mixture of motives. For this is the grandson of Abraham, who has none of the faithful, nor stoic, nor generous actions of his grandfather. The affirmations of faith in this narrative are especially robust, and the narrator knows that the purposes of God are tangled in a web of self-interest and self-seeking. The narrative of Jacob, which includes the narrative of Esau and all the stories that you can imagine within them, is a story of conflict. And it's a conflicted story because there are 2 things that are true about Jacob that don't go together. One is that he has a special blessing from God. He receives a special blessing and lives as part of a special promise. And 2, for that, he is promised a life of woe. I'm going to turn in my Bible. If you want to turn in your Bibles, you can pull the red Bible out of your pew in front of you. I'm turning to Genesis chapter 25. If you're going to pull your Bibles out, I'd say turn there with me. Don't turn somewhere else. And I'm going to read to you the beginning of one of these stories. This is the story of Jacob and his brother Esau. This is chapter 25, verses 21 through 34. Isaac, their father and son of Abraham, second son of Abraham, prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. Remember this? This sounds familiar. And the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. Now Isaac and Rebekah's children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are within your womb, and 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger. When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, and all his body like a hairy mantle, and so they named him Esau. And afterward, his brother came out, with his hand gripping Esau's heel, so that he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. And when the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And once, when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was famished. And Esau said to his brother, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." And Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright," a rather expensive price for a pot of stew. And Esau said, I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me? And Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore to him. And he sold his birthright to Jacob. And then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went away. And thus Esau despised his birthright. I'm going to ask you what you hear in this story, but before I do, I'm going to tell you that Jacob may mean two things. It translates as roughly two different things. One, it means he who comes on the heel of, which is the literal one. Two, it could mean he who supplants. So both are about our plantar fasciitis. Both are about our feet and about what are on our ground. So one, I grabbed you by the heel and I took what was yours and I made it mine. Two, I have supplanted you. What else do you hear in this story? Parents, what do you hear in this story of creation of two children still in a womb? Kim. Kim says one parent favors one child and the other favors the other, which is a recipe for disaster. Other parents agree that this is a bad parenting tactic? Yes. Great. Okay. What else do you hear in this? Yeah. Yeah. There's a Jacob is the brains and Esau is the brawnness of this. This is an echo of last week's Abraham and Lot. That Abraham is a wild man who lives in the fields in tents and herds sheep and cattle and is a rancher and grows things and does all the things. And Lot's a city dweller who likes being in the city and going to libraries and the opera at night and being a little bit more cultured. Jacob is a bookish lad who likes being inside. I like Jacob myself. Yes, I understand that. Yeah. So the brothers don't have much in common from early on, and they're wrestling around in the womb. We imagine that they wrestled around as young boys as well. I have two brothers. I know how this goes. You might too. Terry, did you have something to say, or were you just swooping? Swooping. Turn over to chapter 27. 27:30 through 38. This is what happens after. The boys are grown. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, which is to say that Jacob had come in and stolen not only Esau's birthright, but he'd now stolen his father's blessing. Some of us already know that story. We're not going to do that today. We're going to do that another time, but we're going to deal with what happens afterwards. We're going to follow Esau for just a moment. Esau is, after all, the firstborn. And in theory, we should be following him all along. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of his father, Isaac, his brother Esau, came in from his hunting. And Esau also prepared savory food and brought it into his father. And he said to his father, "Let my father sit up and eat of his son's game so that you may bless me." And his father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" And he answered, "I am your firstborn son, Esau." And then Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me, and I ate it all before you came? And I have blessed him, yes, and blessed he shall be." And when Esau heard his father's words, he cried out with an great and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me also, father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing." And Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob, the one who grabs by heel and who supplants? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and look now, he has taken away my blessing." And then he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" And Isaac answered Esau, "I have already made him your lord, and I have given him all his brothers as servants, and with grain and with wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son?" Can you imagine? It's pretty cruel. As if there's only enough blessing for one. What else do we hear? Terry had a really gut emotional response. Anybody else? Anything else about this story? Sasha, you're kind of squirming. Yeah. There's not a lot of kindness going on here. Yeah, and terribly, terribly transactional. All for a pot of soup. Soup evidently can get you very far. So bring soup next week. Bring soup, share it around. Yeah, really transactional. What else? What else about these brothers and their relationship with their father, Derek?
I kind of sympathize with Esau here because I would think he could bless both of them too. I don't really understand that. I certainly think about both my children in the same way. So that's a little. I'm also a little surprised, having read the story again, which I hadn't read for a while, that Jacob is such a popular name because he kind of seems a little sneaky in this.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see in just a little bit, Jacob is later renamed, as many people in the book of Genesis are when they receive God's favor. Jacob is renamed Israel. So Jacob becomes the father of the Israelites, and Esau becomes the father of the Edomites, another one of the 12 tribes of Abraham. Edom is another word for Esau. Edom means red clay. It's a play on Adam, which means of the earth. Adam means of dirt. That's what Adam's name is. Esau is a play on that, which means red dirt. And funnily enough, in the way that the narrative works here, the word that they're using for stew, this red stew, is a red stew and is a play on Esau itself as well. So there's Esau, Adam, and red stew, and throughout this we have this kind of red theme. Like the Edomites' color is red. If we're in Game of Thrones, this is red banners coming from Edom in the south to Israel in the north. Really, really important. Esau is the first son of Isaac, who is the second son of Abraham, who is the first chosen by God and named and renamed. This is, of course, in the second time when God created the world. The world has already been destroyed once, right? Like, there's been a flood. Everybody except for Noah and Noah's family has been wiped out. God is in the do-over. And again, still can't quite figure out whether it's those firstborns or secondborns, first tries or second ties. God is still working out just how much patience God has. And how much patience and pluck do we have? So those who supplant, those who sneak in, those who take what isn't theirs, on them blessing is given. This doesn't seem fair. Seems terribly transactional. And yet God is still present and still has something else to do. I want us to turn over to chapter 32 right now. I want to hear the third vignette of this Jacob narrative. Chapter 32, beginning in verse 22. Many of you may know the phrase Jacob's ladder, or seen some art about it, or know Jacob wrestling with an angel. Feels to me like if we go away with anything, let's at least have this story today. On the third day, Laban, who is Jacob and Esau's uncle, Laban is Rebekah's brother. On the third day, Uncle Laban was told that Jacob had fled. And so he took his kinsfolk with him and pursued him for 7 days until he caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. But God had come to Laban in a dream, in Armenia by a dream by night, and said to him, "Take heed that you say not a word to Jacob, either good or bad. Don't spook the lad." And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsfolk camped in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You have deceived me." I'm in the wrong chapter. I'm in 31. Sorry about that. Thank you, Terry. I saw that. That's a whole other story that we're not going to do right now. 32, you were correctly there, I was not. Evidently, I need to go back and look at Uncle Laban for some reason that God wants me to, so I'll revisit that later and report back. Chapter 32, beginning in 22. The same night, Jacob is still in his tent out in the wilderness. That same night he got up and took his 2 wives and his 2 maids and his 11 children, and he crossed the ford of Jabbokok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until daybreak. And then when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket. And Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And so he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." And then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. And so Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." Now the sun rose up on him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. And therefore to this day the Israelites do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the hip socket of any animal, because he struck Jacob on the hip socket at that thigh muscle. So this is Jacob and the angel wrestling overnight, all night long until daybreak. What do you hear in this story? What have you heard from the other two stories that shows up again here? Transactions, right? What else? What?
Is there anything that we don't understand about what blessing means?
Uh-huh.
Is there more to it than just, you know, as we look at it as God's blessing? Does it also mean inheritance and
Yeah.
things like that? So that it all seems confusing to me. Again, why there couldn't be enough blessings to go around.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if word-wise there's some definition or expansion on it.
So Lynn is asking a really important question. Lynn is asking the question, is there a definition of blessing in the ancient Near East? What does this mean? Why is it that it can't be shared? Why can't two people be blessed at the same time? Is blessing specific? Is it transactional? Is it monetary? Is it God's favor of the person? Is it just about inheritance? What is it? Yes, it's about all of that, Lynn. Esau, earlier, in the first vignette we saw that Esau sells first his birthright. That is his financial inheritance. He sells his financial inheritance to his brother for a pot of red stew. In the second vignette, we see that Jacob robs Esau of his father's blessing. The words are different. There's first the birthright and then blessing. So these are two different sides of the same coin. There is a financial transaction and there is the blessing of the father. This, imagine for those of you who know your feudal and patriarchal history of Europe, you know that castles and titles go one place and sometimes money goes somewhere else. This is how we have broken down counts and countesses, that sometimes there is an entail that doesn't go with the estate, that it gets divvied up. This is trying to divvy up father's financial wealth from father's inheritance. That's why Esau has both. He gets both the money and the title. He sells first the money to his brother, and then the title goes too when Jacob deceives his father. So when we get here, Jacob is a plucky character. Like, he's never one to miss an opportunity to ask somebody for a blessing, right? Like, this guy is not a Protestant who sits demurely and doesn't ask anything and waits to be given. He has not heard Jesus' instruction to sit at the bottom of the table and wait to be asked to come up. Jacob has been fighting God all night long, doesn't lose, which is important, and then says, "I'm going to ask you something. You have to give me a blessing." Now, this angel is pretty tired at this point and does something kind of deceitful back and strikes him on the hip, but he does bless Jacob and says, "Your name will be Israel." Jacob, the father of the Israelites, one of the 12 tribes, not the only tribe, but one of the 12 tribes of Abraham. As multitudinous as the stars in the sky, as all of these tribes are promised to be, has both his father's birthright, or both his father's inheritance, and his father's blessing, and now the blessing of God. This is the specialness of Jacob, a person that we don't exactly like, who's not a fair-dealing guy, who's a little underhanded, who kind of swoops in and takes what isn't his, and then asks for more. There's some audacity in this. And God seems to grant it. It's a puzzle. It's not quite how we want it to go. Tony. Ah. Yeah. So Tony is taking us to a point. Tony, could you say the beginning of that once more? Say the beginning of what you said once more. There we are. Blessing is tied to responsibility. The word that Tony isn't using, but we could think of as the right word, blessing is a covenant. It's Noah's word. The blessing of the rainbow and the dove in the sky, blessing is covenant. You don't bless without a relationship, right? Like we have to know each other to receive a blessing. When you give a blessing, it's best to know that you are being blessed in the giving. Any of us who maybe serve Tuesday table or like to do good works of charity, or those of us who give our financial resources to help other people, we know that it feels good to give. We know that we are blessed in our blessing. And that has always been part of the scriptural promise to date. Jacob doesn't seem to be giving anything back for the blessings that he is taking and asking. There's something really in that that is a mercurial character, that is on the dark side, which is so very, very human. And this is what this story is. Jacob is a very, very human story. Julia. Yeah. So that's the third meaning that Jacob now has, right? You're adding in the third definition of Jacob's name is one who supplants, one who rides on the other's heel, and now one who has striven with God. Uh-huh. There you are. There you are. Julia, thank you for moving us swiftly to the end of this moment. Yes. In this striving with God and having won, in getting a blessing that wasn't his to begin with, in supplanting expectations, God shows up in a surprising way. When we get to the New Testament, and I don't know, it feels like 3 days, it's going to be Christmas Eve, and we're going to talk about how God supplants all human expectations and turns over even kings of the earth with one born in a cattle shed. Here we find God doing it again. Lynn.
Is it a demonstration that perhaps in some ways it is the people headed in those types of directions that need the blessing even more profoundly, because with each one of those possibilities, perhaps direction that we take will improve or decisions that we make.
Lynn's asking a perennial how many angels can dance on the head of the pin question about who needs the blessing more. Is it the person that is on the margins and that doesn't have the power of the system or the society behind them? Is this the right thing? Is this turning over the tables in the right temple? Is this indeed where blessing should go? And I think that's a question that requires each of our wrestling. If it was Matt, he would say wrestling. So you can wrestle with it, but you can go away and wrestle with this. I think there is a wrestling type question. This wrestling with the angel for blessing is very much the story of Jacob. Julia was right in pointing out that what we're doing, how we've been moving through the narrative. When we started with Adam and Eve, we moved through Noah, we got to Abraham, we got through Isaac and Ishmael. As you see, like, we're winnowing people off of the family tree that we're not paying attention to anymore. Clearly, I liked Uncle Laban and want to go back and talk about him a little bit more. I talked to my nephews on Friday night, so that must be part of it. But we're funneling down who's going to pay attention to. Remember, the book of Genesis is the beginning of the story of our faith. It's like a family tree, and it's all the names, and it's all the begats, and it's all the genealogies that will then come up when it is time that we get to Jesus. And by the time that we get to Jesus, we're going to need a clear lineage all the way back to Adam and to God. So this has to start winnowing it down. Esau is about to be written off stage, just like Ishmael was written off stage. Like, given one of the 12 tribes of Israel, you've got a washer and a dryer, now go away, you did not win the grand prize. The end of this section today, chapter 36, I'm not going to read for you. All of you should be glad that you don't have to read it in church. You would spend hours in my office trying to figure out the pronunciation of all of these names. Chapter 36 is the consolation prize for Esau. If you just take a glance over it, you will see the generations of blessing that God gives Esau, even though Esau didn't ask, and even though Esau has been disinherited, and even though Esau has been cast off by his brother. Look at these generations of blessing that God gives even him.